Don't sign a buyer brokerage agreement unless you have these 3 things in place. It's very important with all of the changes to commission for real estate agents. You need to make sure you don't just sign without knowing exactly these 3 things. I'm Shaheedah Hill, getting you over the hill to home ownership and helping you confidently buy your first home. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I did this video explaining these buyer brokerage changes. And everything is not settled yet, but there will be some changes coming on how you hire and how you work with your buyer's agent. And the buyer's agent is the person that represents you when you're looking for a home. So number 1, you need to know the services the agent will provide. Most contracts, if you look at a real estate contract, a buyer's brokerage agreement, and they'll be a little bit different for each state, you need to get a copy of that contract ahead of time. So before you actually sign the contract, I want you to get a copy of it so you can review it. I also want you to review the contract with the agent that you're considering. Have them go over that contract with you so you can understand what it means. But I want to know, and you need to know, the services that the agent will provide, because in those contracts, it's very vague or very basic. For example, the one in Georgia says broker, meaning the representative, the agent you're working with, will locate and negotiate purchase of property for the buyer. And in some instances, it says attempt to locate a property. So that might be their only obligation to you. They will locate and negotiate the purchase of a property for the buyer. Now, of course, you want a property and you also want to, help with negotiating that property. But is that all you're expecting from your agent? You want to get a list from that agent as to what's going to happen with showings. How are you going to negotiate the contract? You want some more details. How far are you willing to go to show me this house? A lot of agents, as part of their buyer brokerage consultation, are going to tell you, we'll do all of these things for you. You want to see those things in writing, and I'm going to do some follow-ups to this. You may want them as an addendum to that contract. So if they're promising you things above and beyond what is listed in the buyer's brokerage agreement, you want them to put that in writing and make it as an exhibit or an addendum, or put it in the special stipulations so you're both on the same page as to what services they're going to provide. Let me give you an example. Say that you're a luxury home buyer, first-time home buyer, and they're like, oh, we take our clients out in Sprinter vans and show them properties. You want that in writing. You want that as part of your buyer brokerage agreement, that you will personally drive me or you will personally chauffeur me, whatever it is, to my showings. See if they'll put that in writing. If it's not in writing, they may not have to do that for you. So you want to make sure it's going to be a lot more competitive on the buyer side to work with buyers, especially if you have to start paying out of your pocket. So let's get to the number 2 and number 3. Number 2, you need to know how to get out of your contract. You want to know, this is not going well for us. I don't like this buyer's agent. I changed my mind maybe about purchasing a home. How do I get out of the contract? I saw a post on Facebook and somebody was like, how do I fire? You need to know that up front. You need to see, okay, how do I terminate this agreement and what is the penalty, if any, if I terminate this agreement early? You want to know that. And part of the agent going through that contract with you, one of the questions you ask is, what if I need to terminate this contract early before it expires? Okay, and then stop signing long contracts. You want the shortest contract possible. So if on average it takes in your city, and your agent can tell you that, if the average it takes you to find a house is 60 days, make a contract for 60 days. I make my contracts for 90 days, but I have a lot of people making 6-month contracts, 1-year contracts. Make it as short as possible. And you need to know what happens if you want to terminate that contract early. All right, number 3, and this is probably the most important. How much do you owe your buyer's agent? How much will you owe them, if anything? So in the past, right, all sellers would advertise, typically, most sellers would advertise how much commission they were willing to offer your buyer's agent. Okay. And so buyer's agents knew if I show this property, I'll get paid this. If I close on this property, I'll get paid 2%, 3%, 5%. It was out in the open. Now they're taking that away. They haven't done it yet. So nothing's officially changed in most areas. But they're saying, they're proposing in July or so that that's going to go away. You won't know exactly how much each house is offering your buyer's agent. So it's going to put you and your agent in a position to say, okay, you can pay me out of your own pocket, and then we don't have to ask the seller for anything. Or if you don't want to pay me out of your funds, then I will ask on your behalf, if you allow it, buyer, I will ask each seller if they're offering any commission or if they're willing to pay any commission. Now, that commission is not a set amount. Keep on hearing a lot of places, oh, I'm still going to charge 3%. I'm still going to charge 3%. You can charge as a buyer's agent, as a real estate agent, you can charge whatever you want to charge. You can charge $100, $5,000, $10,000, 3%, 5%. It's not a set amount, okay? So don't think that you have to pay your agent 3%. It is negotiable. Okay. Now they can say as an agent, all of my people, all of my clients, I charge them 3%. Okay. And there's going to be it opens itself up to fair housing if they change that percentage a lot, depending on who they're dealing with, that sort of thing. So they're going to have to be really consistent on how much they charge in general, probably, right? Or they're going to have something in writing, like this is how much I charge. This is what I do. Now, you don't want to be on the hook. So let me give you an example. So you go under contract with your buyer's agent because there's going to be a percentage on that contract that you have to pay. You can say that you don't want to see any properties that are not offering a commission, and say your agent says, I want to be paid 2%. I don't want to see any properties that are not offering to pay you 2%. So they're going to have to ask these different, properties before they show them, are you offering at least a 2% commission? Now, in most states, again, it might be different in every state, they're not allowed to take more than that 2%. So if they're under contract with you for 2% and then the house is offering 3%, then they can't just say, okay, I'll get the 3% now because they're under contract with you for that 2%. So it gets a little wonky a little bit. So it has to be very clear, very much in writing. If they want to take that extra 1%, they have to get permission from you typically to get that extra 1%. And what if you want that 1%? Because again, the seller, let's go back to my first video if you haven't already, the seller's worried about how much they're going to net. After everybody gets paid and I sell my house, how much will I be left with, right? So if they're willing to pay a 3% commission, but you're under contract with your agent for 2%, then you could use that 1% toward your closing costs or to something else because they've already said, okay, we're offering 3%. That's where it gets a little bit like a gray area as to how that's going to work. But let me go back to another example. Sorry. You have agreed to pay 2% to your agent. You start looking at houses. There's a house that you want, and you tell them, I don't want to see any houses that are not offering, 2% commission that they're going to pay you. But you find a house that you absolutely love, and they're only offering 1%. So now you go under contract on that house. You are on the hook for that other 1% because you're under contract with your buyer's agent to pay them 2%. The seller's going to pay 1%. You're going to pay 1%. And, you have that in writing. There doesn't need to be any surprises. I did see a post where the buyer was under contract to pay their buyer's agent 3%. They found a house was only offering 2%, and that buyer's agent was saying, okay, at closing, you owe me 1%. That buyer wasn't prepared. They said they didn't understand. You need to make sure you understand your contract. And you need to talk also to your lender because in speaking with lenders are going to be able to tell your agent in most cases, because they're kind of lumping it in with closing costs since, that you have a contract, if you have the money to cover everything. In the past, we could say, hey, do they have enough money for closing costs, that sort of thing. Also, do they have enough money to pay my commission? They're under contract to pay me 2%. So you do not want this deal to fall apart because you don't have the money to pay closing costs and agents and that sort of thing. You want to be very, very clear, right? And then also, I know I'm adding a lot to this. Let me go over my 3 again. Number 1, you want the services the agent will provide. You want to read their contract. Some of the services will be in that contract. If they're offering other things, you want that in writing, and you want it to be an addendum or an exhibit to that contract. Number 2, how do you get out of your contract? And my recommendation would be to sign, shorter term contracts, 60 days, 90 days. Number 3, how much will you owe your buyer's agent? And again, 3%, although it's said a lot, is not a guaranteed amount. You can negotiate that with your buyer's agent. And then you want to make sure if homes are not offering it, what happens if there's a house that you really want that's not offering and you don't want to pay that difference? Will you have the option to go straight to that agent? If you want that option, that needs to be written out in your buyer's brokerage agreement. Let me give you an example. So you've decided, I don't want to see any houses that are not paying at least 2%. However, again, you find this house, maybe they're not offering anything, but you're really interested in it. Now, can you go to that listing agent and say, hey, I'm still interested in this house. I'm not going to use my agent for this one. I'm just going to be a customer, meaning, that listing agent doesn't represent you, but you're willing to do it because you really want that house. Now that would have to be written out in your buyer's brokerage agreement that if there's a house that's not offering commission, then you don't want their representation, or we have something like that. And that buyer's agent would have to agree to that. So you want to make sure you're very clear. What happens if you want a property that's not offering anything and you don't want to pay out of your pocket? There needs to be something in writing regarding that. So I hope this clears it up a little bit. I know it's still a fuzzy area. The settlement has not been finalized. They haven't made a settlement. Everything is just proposed. So please like and subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date, because I will be looking out for my first time home buyers to make sure you're not on the hook or it doesn't mess up your deal. All of these new changes. If you have any questions, please put in the comments. If you have, again, no idea what I'm saying, please watch that other video. Thank you so much.